With us, we were walking back from the party, Ethan and I holding hands, but each unspoken wait. Filling the space between us for the past few months, I'd felt this tension growing in our marriage. At times, it seemed like we were walking on separate paths, unable to hear each, but with each passing day, it became harder to ignore Ethan's penetrating gaze as though he were trying to read my soul. Could take another step, Ethan suddenly blocked my way. His face bore a mix of every time I tried to understand what's going on. Can we finally talk openly? Everything froze inside me. I wanted to leave to avoid the tension, but I knew Ethan wouldn't let it go. The thought of revealing all my doubts and emotions brought me close to panic. Ethan, please. Not now, I tried to evade its own. His voice grew sharper, and I saw his patience waning. Conflicting feelings erupted within me, and I suddenly felt an intense shame for the wall I built between us. I tried to gather my thoughts, searching for the right words, but just then Richard, Ethan's father, who about his thoughts and motivations, guys. He interjected, cutting off. Rachel, maybe it's best if you stay over at my place tonight. It seems like you both could use a little time to cool off. His voice was soft, enveloping, and I sensed a hidden meaning in his words that I couldn't quite decipher. A tense silence fell between us, and I noticed how Ethan tensed, looking at his father, as though struggling with the urge to argue. Stay if you want, he muttered to the guest room at Richard's house as soon as I was alone. A strange sense of everything that hung in the air, but this feeling brought no peace. I felt someone else's presence, and as I looked around, I caught myself expecting Richard's gaze, but insistent knock, and I tensed knowing it was him. Are you awake? Richard asked quietly under his searching gaze, as though he was trying to read something on my face. This late night encounter filled the tension. Richard's house was filled with a peace, a quiet strength that I hadn't realized sat on a stool by the table, watching him, feeling a strange yet calming presence. Good morning, he said, handing me a cup of coffee. I hope you slept well, I nodded, which made the moment feel more intimate than it was. He sat across from me, looking at me with a depth that felt almost unsettling, as if he understood my thoughts and feelings more than I was ready to admit. I suddenly realized I was holding my breath, waiting for his next word. Rachel, he began with a gentleness obvious. His words were so sincere that I felt a slow release of the tension I'd been holding. Perhaps I just needed to let it out, to feel like someone understood. It's been hard, I replied, not breaking eye contact. Ethan, he's changed. It feels like he's drifted away. I don't know what to do. It's like I no longer feel the connection we once had. Richard listened carefully, without interrupting. His gaze was so calm and understanding that I found myself willing to continue. Ethan is a good man, but sometimes I feel like I'm just a part of his life, a piece that fits into his plans rather than a person in my own right. I realized I was speaking too openly, but Richard didn't for a second make me feel judged. His silence became a comforting support, and it felt both nice and dangerous. Richard leaned a little closer, his hands resting on the table, and I noticed how intently he was studying my face. His eyes softened, and I allowed myself to close my eyes and take a deep breath for just a moment. Rachel, he said quietly, but his voice was firm. You deserve to be happy. You know, I've thought for a while now that Ethan doesn't appreciate you as you deserve. I hadn't expected those words. Did deserve more? What do you mean, Richard? I whispered, half knowing I didn't want to hear the answer. Richard gave a slight smile, but his eyes remained serious. To notice his words were so certain that I felt something shift inside me. My gaze his, and I felt a warmth that made my heart beat faster. Richard, I tried to say something, but I stopped, feeling unsure of what words fit here, and then as if stopped, and I simply allowed myself to be lost in the moment. But as suddenly as it began, the kiss ended. I pulled away immediately, overwhelmed by a wave of horror and guilt for Ethan. What am I doing? How could I let this happen? Richard, I started in a trembling voice, trying to grasp what had just happened. He looked at me calmly, a bit sadly, and I saw that unfair of me, but I couldn't hold back. I felt this way about you for a long time moment. How could I betray Ethan so easily, so suddenly? I stood up from the table. Reality. I would have to face Ethan again, but that kiss continued to hold me captive. as if poisoning every breath I took as I said goodbye to Richard. I couldn't bring myself to meet his eyes, just the memory of the kiss filled me with fear and regret. That kiss, oddly enough, had felt genuine and alive yet loose, gathering my thoughts. And feeling a heaviness in my chest, I headed home. The house was quiet. Ethan seemed to be contemplating something serious while we sat at the table for dinner. Since that night I stayed at, Richard's attention had grown between us, becoming more tangible with each passing day. Ethan had noticed the changes, though I tried my best to act as if everything was normal. It was hard to hide when my thoughts and feelings became a battleground between guilt and an irresistible attraction. After a moment of hesitation, Ethan finally broke the silence. "Rachel," he said, leaning forward, his eyes intently studying me. "I feel like something's wrong. We've drifted apart. I can feel it." Ethan's words hit right where it hurt. Yes, I was pulling away. Not because of fading feelings, but because I couldn't suppress my attraction to his father. Thought was eating me alive from the inside, making it difficult to breathe and think clearly. I wanted to deny it, but lying wouldn't change the truth. "Ethan," I began, cautiously searching for the right words. "I don't know what's happening to me. Everything feels so confusing these days." I avoided his gaze, afraid that my eyes would betray me. Ethan sighed, and for a moment it seemed like he was about to say something important, but he just shook his head and said, "We need time to figure this out. Rachel, let's take a break for a while." A break, the word echoed painfully in my chest. But I nodded, realizing that maybe this was exactly what we needed to cool down and sort through our feelings. But in my heart, I knew it wasn't just about us. It was about my growing desire for Richard. The first threw myself into work to avoid the chaos in my mind. But even in the middle of meetings and deadlines, I found my thoughts drifting back to that morning in Richard's kitchen, to his calm voice and the warmth of his gaze. Weeks passed. Ethan and I saw each other less and less. And every time we did, the gap between us seemed wider. I wasn't sure if we were still moving toward each other or slowly drifting into different worlds. One evening, while I was walking home, I saw Richard standing near my building. His presence both startled and thrilled me. "Rachel," he said softly, as though afraid to scare me away, "I just wanted to see you to make sure you're okay." I looked into his eyes and saw that same sincerity that had once disarmed me. Without thinking, I invited him in. The apartment felt strangely small with him inside, as though his presence filled every corner. We sat on the couch and talked, our conversation flowing easily, but under the surface there was an unspoken tension building until it became impossible to ignore. Richard leaned closer, and I felt my heart race, my breath catching in my throat. I don't know how it happened, but soon we were kissing again. This time with more urgency, more need than before. My mind screamed at me to stop, but my body refused to listen. In his arms, I felt both safe and dangerously exposed, like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, one wrong step away from falling completely. I don't know how long we stayed like that, but when we finally pulled away, I saw the conflict in Richard's eyes matching my own. "We can't keep doing this, Rachel," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I know," I whispered, but knowing didn't make it easier. Over the next days, I tried to avoid Richard, but fate seemed determined to throw us together. Every encounter, every accidental touch only deepened the hold he had over me. And each time I saw Ethan, I felt my guilt tighten like a noose around my neck. Finally, the breaking point came one rainy evening when Ethan showed up at my door. His clothes soaked, his eyes searching mine with desperation. "Rachel, I can't pretend anymore. I love you, but I feel like I'm losing you." His words shattered something inside me. Because I knew he was right. I was already halfway gone. My silence told him everything. And in that moment, I saw the hurt in his eyes turn into something colder, something final. Ethan left without another word, leaving me in the doorway. With the sound of rain pounding against the pavement, I stood there for what felt like hours, the weight of my choices pressing down on me. Richard called later that night, but I couldn't bring myself to answer because I finally realized the truth. No matter how strong the attraction, no matter how intoxicating the moments we shared with Richard, I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I had broken something precious, and no amount of desire could fix it. Days turned into weeks, and the silence between Ethan and me became permanent. We separated quietly without the dramatic fights or tears that usually mark such endings. It was as if we both knew there was nothing left to salvage. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town trying to build a new life, but everywhere I went, there were reminders of what I had done. I saw Richard once more purely by chance in a grocery store. Our eyes met across the aisle, and for a moment it felt like no time had passed. He gave me a small, sad smile, and I returned it, but neither of us spoke. The distance between us was now an unspoken boundary that neither dared to cross. I often wondered if he regretted it all, or if, like me, he sometimes replayed those moments in his mind late at night when the world was quiet. In the end, I learned that some desires come with a cost, far greater than we imagine, and that once certain lines are crossed, there is no going back. Ethan moved on, eventually finding someone new, someone who could give him the loyalty and trust I had shattered. As for me, I still carry the weight of my choices, a constant reminder that temptation can feel like love, but in the harsh light of day, it often leaves nothing but ashes behind.